Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the North of Fair podcast, Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Sorry, I've been away for a stint, um, personal reasons. It is 3 p.m. here in Southern Ontario on the 7th day of December. Emergency declaration versus real solutions. Ontario's homelessness reckoning. Across Ontario, mayors are calling on the provincial government to declare a state of emergency over homelessness and addiction. It sounds urgent. It sounds decisive. But here's the forensic truth. Declaring an emergency doesn't build housing, doesn't raise wages, and doesn't increase disability supports. It's symbolic. We're going to break down why emergency declarations fail, what really drives homelessness, and what solutions, especially deeply affordable housing, are actually needed. The rise of the emergency declaration. Mayors across the province are calling on the provincial government to declare a state of emergency. The rise of the emergency declaration, municipal pressure. Cities like Barrie, Toronto, Hamilton have declared homeless emergencies. The framing, mental health and addiction, are often cited as the primary causes. The reality, these declarations raise awareness but don't compel provincial funding or structural change. Barrie, Ontario's example declared a homeless and an emergency. Homeless remains unresolved because the declaration didn't change the affordability math. And the forensic truth, emergency declarations are political theater unless tied to enforceable reforms. So the declaration of emergency, what it does not do. Let's be clear about what a declaration of emergency actually means. Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Doug, here on the North of Fair podcast, Conversations Without Barriers. Yes, I've been away for a stint, just dealing with personal issues, but back out here this afternoon. I'll give you a quick recap because you just come on. Mayors across the province of Ontario has or is asking the provincial government to declare a state of emergency on homelessness and addiction. So the municipal pressure, city like Barrie, Ontario, Toronto, Hamilton, they've had declared homelessness emergencies, framing it with the mental health and addiction. The reality of this is that these declarations raise awareness but don't compel provincial funding or structural change. Barrie, Ontario, just this past summer, had declared a homeless emergency, but homeless remains unresolved because the declaration didn't change affordability. So the declaration of an emergency. So what it does and what it does not do. So what it does is signals urgency. It tells the public the crisis is severe, raises visibility, gets headlines and media attention, applies pressure, asks the province to act. unlocks coordination, allows municipalities to redirect limited resources faster. What it does not do, it does not build housing, it does not lower rents, it does not raise wages or pensions, it does not expand supports, it does not solve homelessness. Barrie, Ontario's declaration has proven this. The awareness rose, but homeless didn't decline. And without the structural reforms, emergencies remain symbolic. The structural drivers of homelessness is not caused by one factor. Housing cost, rent inflation outpaces wage growth. Wages, minimum wage, and even a living wage rates don't meet affordability benchmarks. Supports like the Ontario Disability Support Program and the CPP Disability fall far below survival thresholds. Recent data just come out just a couple of days ago when it comes to food insecurity. 10.6 million Canadians struggle to afford food, forcing trade-offs between rent and meals. Students, tuition, and housing costs push many into precarious living situations. This year of 2025, the average family was spending about $16,500 a year on groceries alone. This coming fiscal year, 2026, this is expected to raise another $1,000 a year, bringing it up to $17,500 a year for the average family. Mental health and addiction are real factors, but they're only part of the picture, and the larger drivers are economic. So when it comes to the housing, rent in cities like London, Toronto, and Ottawa have exploded. Wages, the minimum wage here in Ontario is $17.60 an hour. The living wage in London is $21.05. In Toronto, it's $27.20. Even at those rates, workers are housing burdened. Grocery prices have risen 4 to 6% this year alone, and a family of four spends about $16,500 annually, going to increase by another $1,000 this coming fiscal year. Food insecurity, 10.6 million Canadians live in food insecure households. Housing, wages, and food is the math of survival. And when any one collapses, the whole system fails. So here's what rent should be if pegged to 30% of income. Someone who is on ODSP, $420 a month. The reality is $1,500. CPP disability seniors, $480 to $540 a month. Reality is $900 plus. Minimum wage families, $675 a month. The reality, $1,800 to $2,000. Middle class families, London living wage, so $21.05, should be $925 a month. The reality, $1,500 to $2,000. Toronto's living wage at $27.20. The rent should be $1,125 a month. Reality is $2,400 a month. Rents are 2 to 3 times higher than affordability. That's why homelessness rises. That's why food insecurity grows. The deeply affordable housing needs here in Ontario alone We are the largest province here in Canada. Ontario requires over 805,000 deeply affordable units by 2035. That includes 93,000 supportive housing units, 55,000 units for Indigenous households, 145,000 moderately affordable units for middle income families, 225,000 existing affordable homes that must be repaired or preserved. Without this scale of an investment, homelessness will continue to rise no matter how many emergency declarations are made. The spending, the versing the needs. So we'll talk about what the province is actually spending. They've announced $75.5 million for supporting housing and affordable housing, and $1.7 billion to improve supportive housing across Ontario. This sounds big. This sounds bold, but let's test the math. Building supportive housing costs about $300,000 per unit. At $1.7 billion, that's roughly 5,600 units. But Ontario needs 93,000 supportive units just to meet current demand. That's a gap of nearly 87,000 units. And when you look at the broader picture, the province needs again over 805,000 deeply affordable units by 2035. So when mayors say the province isn't spending enough, they're right. Millions and billions sound impressive, but the math demands tens of billions, not hundreds of thousands of units. This is a forensic truth. Until government spending matches the scale of need, homelessness will not decline. Emergency declarations without deeply affordable housing are just words. So where does this leave us? Declaring a state of emergency may sound bold, but it doesn't solve homelessness. It's awareness without action. The forensic truth is this: homelessness, driven by housing costs, wages, and inadequate supports, mental health, and addiction are part of the story, but not the whole story. If Ontario wants to resolve homelessness, it needs structural reforms, especially the 805,000 deeply affordable housing units, pegged to income. Because without them, every declaration, again, is just words. Survival math doesn't change with headlines, it changes with policy. And that is the reckoning we face. Now, the city of London, the homeless population currently estimated at 2,000. And it's growing and roughly 5% per year. Around 20% of those experiencing homeless in the city identify as Indigenous. The registry count is about 2,000. So we can't count the hidden homeless, obviously, as people couch surfing, staying with family or friends, sleeping in their cars. The number of unhoused residents is increasing at a rate of 5% annually, showing the crisis is worsening rather than stabilizing. The Indigenous representation, roughly 1 in 5 unhoused individuals in London identify as Indigenous, highlighting the disproportionate impact on marginalized communities. The funding pressures: London spends about $46 million annually on homeless services, including shelters, outreach, and supports. However, federal funding reductions are expected to cut $2.3 million from the city's budget, further straining services. The shelter initiative, the city is opening a new micro model shelter site with 60 units designed to provide temporary housing until 2027. This is part of London's whole of community system response plan, but it addresses only a fraction of the need. London homeless problem is not static, it's growing steadily despite emergency declarations, which the province, like the mayors, are asking the province to declare the emergency. Despite the emergency declarations and new shelter projects, the 2,000 people unhoused today represent only the visible crisis. Many more are precariously housed. Like I said, couch surfing or spending unsustainable portions of their income on rent. The mismatch between current provincial spending, $75.5 million plus $1.7 billion for supportive housing, and the actual scale of need of 805,000 deeply affordable units across Ontario means city like London will continue to see homelessness rise unless the system reforms are made. Well, London, Ontario currently has about 400 to 450 overnight shelter beds available, with capacity expanded in winter through warming centers and temporary modular shelters, which, by the way, they're not even built yet. They talked about, they didn't start talking about a winter response plan until like October. They didn't have a winter response plan last year. I know this because I live in the city. And those 60 modular homes, tiny homes, they're not even built yet. And the land they want to put this on is not even cleared yet. And they want to have this, they want to have this open. I think they're talking at the end of January, not the beginning of January. I mean, what are we looking at? 3 weeks before January begins? They're talking the end of January. So the traditional shelters, Salvation Army Center of Hope provides emergency shelter beds for men and women 16 plus. Other long-standing shelter mission services, the Unity Project, uh, contribute to the city's baseline of 400 beds. The micro-modular shelter site, which they haven't even started yet, you know, newly it's going to be opening. Well, they say January, but I don't think they're going to have it ready in 3 weeks. So 60 modular units with heating, washrooms, and on-site supports. And it's scheduled to remain open until April 2027. Warming centers are seasonal. So during extreme cold, minus 15 Celsius or colder, the city activates 110 additional overnight warming spaces at community centers. We wait till it's minus 15 Celsius. The city of Toronto waits till it's only minus 5 Celsius before they open up any additional spaces, warming centers. The tiered cold weather response adds another 70 bids at the Bishop Cronin Memorial Church, plus plus 50 surge spaces when conditions worsen. So the baseline capacity at 400 to 450 overnight shelter beds year round. Winter surge capacity up to 600 plus bed spaces when warming centers and modular shelters are fully activated. Gap versus the need. London's homeless population around 2,000 people, meaning even at maximum surge capacity, two-thirds of unhoused residents have no guaranteed overnight bed. So where does this leave the rest? So that means at least 1,300 to 1,600 people are left without a guaranteed bed every night. Many of them are forced to sleep outside in vehicles or in a tent. And the tent encampments are scattered across the city. The encampment reality here in London encampments, the city has seen multiple tent sites emerge, especially near downtown, riverbanks, and industrial edges. Even with modular shelters opening 60 units, the majority of unhoused residents remain outside. The cold weather risk and extreme cold. Warming centers add 110 spaces, but the gap remains massive. With 2,000 people unhoused and only 600 beds at best, again, two-thirds of the London's homeless population is left outside on any given night. What the mayors are asking for, well, I mean, asking to declare a state of emergency on homelessness and addiction. We've seen it from time and time again of other cities who have declared a state of emergency about homeless tent encampments. Barrie was recently doing that back in the summertime. I don't know if it even worked right now. I remember, the premier and the mayor of Barrie standing just adjacent to a tent encampment. Well, first and foremost, I mean, they're not safe. We've had a lot of problems, fires, and so on. They're not safe any time of year, whether it's summer, winter, fall, spring. It doesn't matter. So Barrie declares this state of emergency. And the premier goes out there a few days and he sees what's going on. And lo and behold, Barrie, Ontario still has homeless. We can sound we can sound the alarm. But what I talked about here is what is actually needed. 805,000 deeply affordable homes for the province of Ontario. The homeless population for Ontario itself, the most populous province of Canada. 80,000 homeless. Across Canada, they estimate about 235,000. They estimated that 35,000 Canadians sleep rough on any given night. The city of Toronto alone has anywhere from 16,000 to 17,000 homeless. That's just the city, not the Greater Toronto Area. From systemic breakdowns from over the decades of government, and starting in the mid 80s, going into the 90s, government from the federal to provincial pulling out of the housing funding, from the federal passing it down to the provincial government passing it down to the municipalities. I believe it was 1996 here in the province, the premier then was Mike Harris. He canceled 17,000 affordable housing units. That was the biggest cancellation of any housing in Canadian history. We are losing our affordable stock. Those ma and pa landlords are in the distance. Corporation and investors buying up these properties, raising the rent double, triple when people move out. I went back to one of the old dwellings that I lived in many years ago, and those rents for a one bedroom are anywhere from 1,500 to 1,750 a month, when they were only 750 for a one bedroom. We had rental evictions on the rise, and it's not because you have to move out because they need to go there and paint and do a cosmetic paint job or whatever. They just want you out so they can double the rent or triple the rent. Yeah, there are bad actors out there, and with landlords too. But there are bad actors. You have the professional tenants. They pay to move in, but then they stop paying. The provincial government had recently come out with Bill 60. Now, Bill 60 is speed up evictions. I understand the frustration of some landlords. People buy, other property for an investment. You rent it out. Obviously, you want good tenants. Renting your home or renting your condo or whatever you're going to rent out. But I also want to remind people too, if you're renting from private, um, that is not your forever home. What some point in time, 5 to 10 years, 5 to 10 years, potentially 10 years, equity has built into that property. Maybe if you're lucky, you might be able to be there for 15 years. Maybe they want to rent it out to family, which they're allowed to do. Now, Bill 60, more about this is so what the Bill 60. So let's start with what the Bill 60 actually does. Cuts tenant appeal times at the landlord tenant board from 30 days to 15. Blocks renters from introducing new evidence at hearings. Eliminates 1 month rent compensation for personal use eviction. So if they want to move in a family member, before they had to pay you 1 month. Now they don't. Shortens evictions notice for arrears from 14 days to 7. Forces tenants to pay 50% of alleged arrears up front before defending themselves. Strips municipalities of planning power, giving the housing minister expanded discretion over approvals. So in London, like I said, London is the living wage is at $21.05 an hour. That's a living wage. That's not the minimum wage. The minimum wage is $17.60 an hour. They're saying London um, is the living wage to be able to pay your rent and buy your groceries. Is $21.05 an hour. That's $37,000 net a year. So rent for a 1 bedroom, $18,000 annually, nearly half of the income. So in Toronto, the living wage, not the minimum wage, because Ontario's minimum wage is $17.60. So by city, being Toronto the most expensive city to live in, I probably, probably Ottawa too, is $27.20, the living wage. That's 56,000 gross, and the rent average is 2,400 a month, 28,800 a year. That's half of take-home pay. So Bill 60 doesn't tie new supply to affordability. It accelerates luxury builds and displacements. More condos at $2,500 a month doesn't compete with basement apartments at $1,200. They serve different markets. So the framing collapses. Supply without affordability benchmarks doesn't lower rents, it raises them. So picture a tenant. They fall behind on rent. Under Bill 60, they get 7 days notice instead of 14. They must pay half of alleged arrears up front just to defend themselves. Or a family in Toronto evicted for personal use under Bill 60, landlords no longer owe them 1 month's rent compensation. They're displaced with nothing. These aren't efficiencies, they're accelerations of hardship. And Bill 60 makes it easier to evict, harder to defend, and impossible to afford. So Bill 60 isn't about building faster, it's about shifting power. From tenants to landlords, from municipalities to the province, from affordability to speculation. It's framed as supply side reform, but it's really a displacement act, accelerates evictions, strips local oversight, and leaves affordability untouched. Bill 60 is framed as efficiency, but it's efficiency for landlords, not tenants. It dismantles protections, accelerates evictions, and undermines affordability. See, the reason why they come out with this Bill 60 because we have the bad actors out there. We have these professional tenants out there who just don't want to pay the rent. They become squatters. It takes months on end, or even a year, even to get before the landlord's tenants board, and these people are not paying the rent. So these bad apples and this Bill 60 now affects everyone. Making $19 an hour, $20 an hour, you're struggling as it is. One injury, one illness, a layoff, will put you out in the street. Housing justice means closing loopholes, enforcing right of return, and tying supply to affordability benchmarks. Without that, every new build is just another unit priced out of reach. The truth is simple. Bill 60 doesn't fight delays; it fights tenants. And if we want housing just in Ontario, we need to fight back. Advocacy groups all across Ontario, from Lifespan to Acorn to others, are challenging this Bill 60. When people get a notice such as a reno eviction, that doesn't mean you have to move out. You have the first right of refusal. Cities like London, Hamilton, I think Toronto also now has implemented um, a bylaw when it comes to rental evictions that whoever owns these properties, they have to pay $600 per unit, and an inspector has to come in to see whether or not the tenant has to move out for these renovations. And the whole package goes together in a timeline when this job is to be done. And the tenant moves back in at the existing rent that they were paying. There's too many times that this has happened to tenants that they say, okay, I will move out while you complete these renovations. And move back in when they're done. And what happens is the opposite. The landlord re-rents it to somebody who's going to pay $1,700 a month instead of $800 a month. And this is why these new bylaws are coming out, to prevent that from happening. We're building for profit faster than we are building for affordability. The new high rises that went down, like I can go out onto my street, walk out my front door, walk under the middle of the road, and I can look to the west and I can see the skyline of the downtown. Those new builds are luxury builds. Some of them are $3,000 a month. Those are for retirees, or their children have moved out of their homes, they sold their homes, and they want to move into the downtown core. So empty nesters. It's not for your average. It's not for your average worker, your average wage earners. To the east of me, I would have to drive there. It once was the property of the psychiatric hospital that closed years ago. Corporations and investors are now building there, and these are luxury homes, luxury high rises. And these luxury high rises, there would be businesses below, tenants living above. We're talking, 30-story buildings, luxury homes, luxury condos. It's going to add 9 to 10 streets to the city. This is a benchmark that the city missed. It's, full well knowing, and this only just started last year. So full well knowing the crisis at hand. And now these corporations and investors come in and they get this land to build the unaffordable housing. It just makes me sick. When you got property like that and you have a crisis on your hand, because last year we had a crisis, 2 years ago we had a crisis, 5 years ago we have a crisis. And what do we call it today? It's a crisis. So getting back to the grocery prices now. So this year, 2025, the average family, Canadian family, spent $16,500 annually for groceries. This coming fiscal year, they're talking is going to go up another $1,000. Beef is leading that in the price of your groceries. Chicken and pork is on the rise. Not just because people are just switching from beef and going to chicken and pork, because uh, avian bird flu. So the chicken and pork is rising as well, not at the highest pace as what beef is at. So you think about, what does a family of four? I mean, what do you think they spend now a month? How much are they spending? How much are they spending weekly? Turning into the month, for 400 a week times 4 week is 1,600 a month. Maybe they're around 350 a week. That's 1,400 a month. So on average, they're spending 350 a week. That's 16,800 a year. And that's going to go up another 1,000. So they're estimating 7,500. They're predicting 4% to 6% increase is what they're predicting. But the prices are going to keep going up. So that 17,500 for the coming fiscal year, that could easily be 18,000 the coming fiscal year. And they talk about why the beef prices are so high, inadequate stock, that's declining. It's the lowest. It's the lowest in the herd stock since the middle of the '80s. Population growth. So these cattle ranchers and all this like that. I mean, they got to make the money up from somewhere. It's not like they don't have enough land for their herd. They have less herd. Winter months are rough. But when everything else goes up, chicken and pork go up. Maybe your eggs, your bacon. And you got to remember too, like food essentials, like your meat and your potatoes and your vegetables, um, your cereal, milk, or like that. Like the basics are not taxed, but the prices are extremely high. Now maybe you got teenagers living in the home and they like to eat all the time. They like to snack all the time. See, when I was growing up, when I was growing up, snacks were a treat. Some chips, maybe once a month dad would order a pizza. There wasn't seconds. There was three hots and a cot. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There wasn't dessert after supper. There wasn't ice cream. There wasn't cake. There wasn't any of that stuff. Your meal was your meal. It wasn't bedtime snacks. And that's growing up, and that's growing up throughout the '60s. Dad worked, mom stayed home. We got 7 kids. Today, people are having one, maybe 2 children. It's not the big families. It's not the big families anymore. 7, 8 kids. I knew a family that lived around the corner from us. As they had 12 kids. Another family had 14 kids. Today, you'd have to be pretty wealthy to feed and clothe all those children. The food insecurity. So, people resorting to the food banks. That's also on a dramatic rise. And some of the rise is from people who have now just coming to that aid where they never had to before. And they need donations. There was once small buildings, so community people living in these small buildings, they would have a food pantry. Bring something, take something, and that's for that small community. I haven't really heard more much about it. Um, that was over the summer months, and these people, they're on fixed incomes. Just trying to help each other out. It was shocking to hear that this coming fiscal year, food prices are going to, for the average family, it's going to cost them $1,000 more a year. How much really it's going to be, that's going to be remain to be seen. How much more is beef going to go up? How much more is chicken going to go up? How much more is pork going to go up? Because people are switching from one going to the other. And then the demand. I guess we're just going to have to just wait and see of what it's going to be. But I want to go back to the beginning of the show here because, as you well know, and if you are following me, I haven't been out here for a little while, and it's happened. It's happened before, just dealing with some personal matters. So I'm hoping to just get the train back on the tracks because I like coming out here and talking to you, and I like you having you on my show. I mean, this is the last month of the year, 7th of December. It was getting harder to just get out here. I mean, even just see, I work nights too, and that's pretty rough at times. And then be prepared, for even an afternoon show in the middle of the week. Try to put 2 to 3 shows out, maximum of 3 shows a week. Pick and choose the days. Because I'd say, okay, I'm going to be out here on such and such a day, such and such a time, and then it doesn't happen. If you're following me and I post a show, you would get a notification. Now, everybody generally throughout the week, even in the afternoon, weekday in an afternoon, certainly can't be in the evenings because, like I say, I work throughout the evening overnight. So any weekday would have to be 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon. Weekends, morning or afternoon. And certainly, I won't be doing a show on the 24th. That's Christmas Eve. Nothing on the 25th. That's Christmas Day. Day after Christmas. Yes. That's a Friday. That's the 26th. The Saturday or the Sunday. But in between, we got next weekend, right? We got the 13th and we got the 14th. So either those 2 days, I can put out a show. So, but anyways, we'll see how things are going and how I'm doing. But yeah, just thank you for coming out. this afternoon. So take care. Enjoy the upcoming week. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Doug, from Ontario, Canada. This is the North Affair podcast, Conversations Without Barriers. Thank you for joining me.